Okay, so let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do with my freshly UV sword here is I'm going to export it out. So let's go to File and Export, and then I'll use Wavefront Object, and I have a pre-prepared folder here, and I'll put this in at the sword low. There we go, OBJs, etc. and export. Okay, and next what we're going to do is we're going to create a higher subdivision version of this to smooth everything out, and then we're going to use that higher poly mesh to create a normal map to make our low poly mesh look more like the high poly mesh. So let's do that now. So on the modifiers, we'll add modifier and give it a subdivision surface, and let's set that to 2, and then we can export this out. Well, actually we need to apply it first, so let me apply the modifier, and then again with the model selected, it's File, Export, Wavefront Object, and this time I'll save it as high. So save it as low and high, so you know which is which. So let's export that out, and now we can go into, whoops, that's the wrong program, Substance Painter. Okay, so File, New, let's be brave, it's only one map, so 4096 with the DirectX normal there. If you're using OpenGL, as ever, use OpenGL. And then we'll go select, and we'll select our low poly sword, because that's what we're going to paint on, and that's what we're going to bake our map to. So apart from that, everything else is fine, so I'm going to click OK. Give it a wait a moment, and then when we go to bake our maps, we can add that high poly mesh to the bake to generate a shaping normal. So let's again, I'm going to set it to 4096 to give myself a nice amount of space. Say it's only one texture set, so I'm not going to break the bank on memory. And then under here where it says high definition meshes, I'll click this little piece of paper here and select my high resolution. Okay, I'm going to leave everything else as default, and then we'll see where we go from there. Okay, so what do? Bake selected textures. Actually, let's do our ambient occlusion. Let's set that up high and set it to about the middle, and similar for curvature, we'll go to high and set it in the middle, just as kind of a starting point. And then I shall bake the selected textures. They might take a minute or two longer than normal when you're not baking from a high poly to a low poly mesh, but it shouldn't be too much. And all that's doing is just calculating the difference in vertex positions and creating a map to try and bring them together. Okay, so let's close that out, and as you can see we have a nice smooth shiny sword, which looks like it's got lots of geometry in it. You can kind of see that it's faceted, but there's many more facets, or faces rather, than our low poly mesh. And just to prove that that is coming from the normal map, I'm going to delete it, and that's what it looks like without. So it adds a bit of refinement, a bit of shape to your model without having an awful lot of extra polygons to get it, which is great if you're doing low poly models. And for this model, for example, I probably wouldn't have it as a hero piece. I would have it somewhere off in the background, maybe on a desk or a table, and the same thing, on a wall, somewhere in a scene, but not like a central focus piece. So let's undo that, see if that map will come back. It will, and there we go. Now we can see that it looks much smoother, as you would expect from having a lovely subdivided mesh. Okay, so that's terrific. So in the next one then we're going to start to build up this texture and really make use of, you know, our maps and effects and filters and all sorts of things to get a really nice result. So I'll talk to you then. Okay, so we've baked our textures out and we're ready to start. But before I put any colour information into this, I want to actually sculpt some detail. I say sculpt, build is the word. So I've got my Pure F. You can't see where I'm pointing, obviously. So, you know. And so we've got our sword ref here, and it's a fairly plain sword, nothing very particularly exciting about it, but it's got lots of nice little bits of detail in it and lots of worn edges. It's not very shiny, and you know, that's what I want really. So first of all, I want to sculpt in or build into the surface these kind of bands around the hilt. So let's do that. Let me just minimize down here, and I'm just going to get rid of this, and then I'm going to create a folder, and we're going to call it Hilt, and we're going to add a black mask to it. So I'm on the flood fill tool, and I'll select model, and I'll select the actual piece. Let's go to the mask view to make sure that worked. It has. So that nice white piece is the only piece we're going to, you know, work on. Okay, so underneath that I want a fill layer. Let's pop this back to material, and for this fill layer I only really want to build up a bit of height at the moment, or you know, dig in some detail. So we're going to add a black mask to this, and we're also going to add to that black mask a fill layer. So on this fill layer, let me just take that filter out, we can put like a procedural texture which we can modify to build up a line, and then we can stack it on itself to bring up, you know, the pattern we want. So in my textures library up there, I'm just going to type line, and we get a few up, but what we can use is one of these gradients. So we've got gradient line 2 and gradient line 1, and I think gradient line 2 probably fits because it's got like a broader, you know, white peak rather than a very thin white peak. So let's drag and drop that into our slot there, and now we can update our parameters. So let's go and have a look at the mask, and we'll see what happens if I can find it. There it is. So at the moment it's here, you know, it's one image over the entire 0 to 1 UV, and I'm going to change the balance down. So you'll see as I change the balance it gets thinner, and then as I change the contrast it gets a bit sharper, and that's good. Now the only real issue is at the moment is that it's too big, it's too thick. So I'm going to grab this top piece down here and just drag it down, and as I drag it down it's going to create that nice banded pattern across our hilt. So let's go back to the material view. Nothing's happening at the moment because I'm controlling all of it from the layer. So on this layer I'm going to turn off all these options here, everything except height, and then if I push that out you'll see it comes out of the mesh, and if I push it to the left it goes in, and that just happens to be the effect we're after. Okay, so that's built a bit of detail for us, and you know, we can change it, of course. We can update and do all sorts of things. So let me go into the gradient layer. For example, I could invert it and it would go the other way. We could put some rotation into it, although only 90 degrees at this stage. There's also like an independent tiling option, so I can really tile it down. See, that gives really, you know, thin bands as it's multiplying out that you know, that texture. There we go. Okay, so that's building that up. And while I'm here, just a quick note: if you have the patience, and I promise you I don't, you can put this on an angle, but you're a bit limited in that you have to watch for your seam. So if I rotate this, you'll see immediately it goes out of kind of sync. I've got it near there, so yeah, the lines aren't meeting up anymore. But if you adjust and twiddle and tweak, you may just get it so that it matches up perfectly. That's probably just a teeny tiny bit out at the moment, so I might just nudge this by 0.0 something, or perhaps 0.1 something. Let's make it 6 and see what happens. That's the wrong way, so let's make it 0.8, and that's a bit closer. So you can actually, you know, put some angles in these things, but just be careful that your seam matches up, because if it doesn't, you know, it will be seen. But it is nice to have it on an angle, you know, rather than straight, because it looks, you know, like you've made more effort, even though I haven't. Okay, so next then we'll start to build up the metal in this, and we'll also start to use our maps and generators to give it some detail. So I will talk to you in the next video. Okay, so below this I'm going to add another fill layer, and that fill layer is going to be our very, very base material. So let's do that, and if it actually appears in the folder, just grab it and drag it out. I'm going to drag it up to start with, then collapse that folder and then drag it below till I get that white line, the very low white line. There we go. So this I'll call our base metal. Whoops, a bit heavy on the caps there. So what we're going to do is pick up just a very base metal material, and we're just going to get it looking like the broad colour in the sword. So let's do that. Let's take that filter off and go to materials, and up here I'm going to type metal, and that gives us all of our metals. Even though they don't say metal, it's in the metadata of the you know, the underlying data of the file. So this iron I think is perhaps a bit about right actually, but not pure. I think that'd be too shiny to start with. Powder coated, no, don't like that really. Well, let's go pure. And one of the reasons that I've made that decision is because it's just 3 channels. It's base colour, roughness, metallic. Very straightforward, very simple. There's no complications in it. But this colour is clearly wrong to our reference. So I'm just going to move that over to one side and click on my base colour and use my ink dropper. So I've left click and hold, and then I'm going to draw it over to my image, and then just drag it around until I think I've got a nice colour, or got the right colour. So if I go into the very dark bits, it's going to be very dark obviously. If I go to the light bits, it's going to be very light. I want something in the middle, so somewhere in there I think. There we go. So let's just minimise PureRef, and there we have something close, but it's too shiny, you know, and that was one of the kind of features of our sword, was that it wasn't very shiny at all. So I'll bring PureRef up and just, whoops, wrong button, move that over there for a second, and I'm just going to adjust the roughness until I get to somewhere where I want. So there's going to be some shine on it. You can see it around the pommel there, but not in general. So I might even try and match my kind of viewing angle and then attempt to match the light. I don't know. Let's see what I can get. No, my brain isn't, it clearly isn't working for that. So if I take my roughness up to half, it appears, I think that might be too much. And if I bring it down a little bit, I think that is not enough. If you want to test it, you can always press the shift key and right mouse and move your light around, and sometimes you get a kind of a better look on it. So if I take that up, I think somewhere around there, see, I'm getting a sheen and a shine, but I'm not actually you know, getting really high point reflections. We can always adjust it later, of course, but you know, all I'm doing at the minute is building up a kind of base layer. Also, if your colour you don't think is quite right, you can always go to the colour grid, colour picker, and actually I'm going to move that away from having any colour, especially a kind of a pink. Nothing against pink, I was just thinking more blue. And then I'm going to move this into blue somewhere, and perhaps go back a little. Yeah, nothing too obvious or extreme, just enough for the moment. Okay, so fiddle around with your settings, get to a point where you're happy, and when you are, come back and we'll have a look at the next piece where we start to build some layers onto this. So I'll talk to you then. Okay, so now we've got our initial material up and we've set a colour. What I want to do is duplicate it and adjust it a little bit. So I'm going to right click on our base metal there. I've named it base metal just so I know where I am, and I'm going to duplicate the layer and we'll call this base metal L2 for layer 2, and then with that one I'm going to take the base colour and bring it its vibrance down, just adjust it until you know it looks good to you. There's no kind of rhyme or reason to it, you know, it's a lot of it's just by eye. I can't say, you know, put it to 0.4596 and it will just work. That's, you know, not how it works. And then we're going to take the roughness and move that over again until it looks as you want it to. And now we're going to blend this in a bit. So let's start that off. So we'll right click and add a black mask, and then right click and add a generator, and in that generator I'm going to put a mask editor. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. So it comes in initially, let's go to the mask view, with curvature set. So what we can do is up and down this curvature until we get to what we want. So I don't want it to be, you know, really, really noticeable, and I don't want it to be really, really, you know, too widespread, but I do want it to show up. So let's go into the curvature, and we can adjust here now. Again, I could say take all my big features out, and that will tighten up some of those areas. I could reduce the medium and reduce the soft to get the kind of effect I'm looking for. But still at this stage I'm not looking for fine detail, I'm looking for a broad overall look on my sword. And I could even take some of the larger or the really fine details out. Okay, so let's go back to the mask and have a look at that. the material rather. And again, if you're wondering whether it's actually doing anything, turn the layer off and you'll immediately see that it is actually doing something or other. Not necessarily what you expect it to do, but it is definitely doing something. But because this metal is duller than what's below it, it's kind of the wrong way around. So what I'm going to do is invert this mask, and I'm going to invert the curvature, not the whole thing. So let's click invert, and there I get a bit more of the effect I want on the blade, which is some shiny worn bits and some duller kind of excuse me, frog in the throat today, same as every day really. So yeah, that looks good, I like it. So it's all a bit normal, so I want to add some variation to this, so I'm just going to close up my curvature here, and I've still got metal here, and it just happens to have this metal galvanic large on it. We should have a couple of others here, galvanic small and rust free, no, rust fine, sorry, not free. I'm going to use the galvanic large and drag it into my texture. Nothing will happen initially because we have to increase our texture opacity, and if I dial that up, you should see that it's really got blotchy in places. So again, I'm going to go to the mask to see what's happening, and then I'm going to adjust my texture opacity to make it much more subtle. So I want this effect to be broken. I don't want, you know, long smooth surfaces of texture. I want to break it up and give it some surface detail and interest. Okay, so we can also open up the texture underneath. We can invert, try that, see what that looks like. Let's go back to the actual material. So invert, we can do the grayscale version, we can do the mode, so we could do a dodge or a subtract or any of these options. We can change the scale and the contrast, so the contrast will just, you know, make it tighter. So if I turn that up, you'll see it comes up very tight indeed and gives kind of a nice effect, but not the effect we're after. So I'm going to take that down just so I can just see what's going on. The brightness again will have a reasonably big effect on what's going on. We could do a triplanar, which I'm not going to for this particular one. And what else have we got? Contrast and non-square tiling. No, they're all fine. So finally I can just adjust my opacity again to get to where I want to, and that's really unsubtle. So I'm going to dial it back so it is almost non-visible, almost to the point where you're questioning whether it's there or not. And once again, you turn your layer on and off to see what's happening. So that's really heavy, and somewhere about, you know, mid-20s, midpoint 2s, I think I'm getting to where I'm quite happy with that. Okay, so that's that one, and that will have applied elsewhere on there, but I was concentrating on the blade because that was my kind of key area to look at. And when we come back, we're going to add another layer. We're going to really build some layers here because I really want to build some interest and detail. So I'll talk to you then. Okay, so we've got a couple of layers, and I'm just going to go back to my reference. Let's get PureRef up, and I've just zoomed in a bit, and I want to recreate some of this kind of look. You see there's kind of an almost, I'm not sure what you call it, burn, or it's dusty, or it's something layer into the sword. Now I could paint my mask here, but I don't like to this early in the game. I like to do that later, so I'm going to put a general kind of look on it, and then we may paint later on in the process. Okay, so back to substance, or rather minimise that, and I'm going to duplicate my base layer here, and whoops, where's duplicate gone? There it is. Drag it above my layer 2, and I'll call this Dusty Metal Layer. There we go. And from that I'm going to use my colour picker again to pick out this colour to see what I'm working with. So again, I don't want the very light, I don't want the darkest, I want something in the middle. So let's go somewhere around there. Okay, that looks good actually. I'm pleased with that. Let's minimise that. So as you can see, it's all over, but I really want to dusty it up. And so I've increased the roughness, and now I'm looking at it, I can see that this colour is too dark. So I'm going to line it up. So I've got kind of the right colour area and the right colour sort of grey with a tinge of red in it, but it was just too dark. So let's take that up, perhaps a little bit down from there. There we go. And now I'm going to put a mask over it to pop it into certain places. Now it doesn't seem to be anywhere in particular. It's not like in a cavity, it's not you know, it's on cavities and, you know, slopes, it's on curves, it's on, yeah, it's just generally everywhere. So I'm going to use a generator, but I'm not going to use anything with like a cavity or an occlusion in it. So let's minimise that and add our black mask, and then right click. Let's use a generator, and this time I'll perhaps just use a mixture of textures. So with the mask editor, I'm going to turn the I don't know what happened there. Turn the curvature or curvature opacity down, and this time I'm going to pick 2 textures. None of these, so let's take that out and just pop in a grunge. So I'm looking somewhat with sort of like really harsh whites and really harsh blacks, and that looks quite a nice look. I like that. So I'll drag that one into there, and then we'll do our first image inputs. Where are we? Something happened there, something not quite right. Oh yes, I haven't upped the opacity. So let's go to our mask and see what it's looking like. So first of all, our blending mode is overlay. There's nothing to overlay, it's not going to be shown. So I'm going to stick that to normal, and that gives quite a nice overall kind of dusty look. It's not tiling, you know, it won't tile in itself, I think. Well, maybe it is, maybe I'm being ungenerous, but I don't think we can adjust the scale too much, is what I'm trying to say. Blend mode, I could invert it actually. I want to invert it because I want it to be a bit further up the blade, and I also here's the scale. Yeah, we can adjust the scale a little. We can adjust the contrast to have some, you know, harsh whites and some dark darks. Take the brightness down or up. I think that's okay. Triplanar contrast, we're not using triplanar. Non-square tiling, I'm not using that either. Okay, so that's okay. but it's not really what I want. I also want there to be something else in this, so I'm going to put another texture in here in my image inputs. So I'm going to take that down. No, I'm not. I'm going to stop pressing buttons, I think. Let's collapse that, and we're going to put another one in here. And this one I want to be kind of more black, and I almost want it to be a gradient with you know, black at the bottom and light at the top. But I don't think I'm going to get that. So let's have a scan around to see what I can do. Okay, so I'm looking at this here. I quite like that one, and I quite like that one because it looks kind of stainy. So let's drag and drop that into texture 2, and then we can go up to texture 2 and turn it on, and there, that's what I kind of wanted. I wanted it to really interact and darken lower on the blade and leave the top a little whiter. You'll notice here we've got this white bit and then a black bit, and that's down to the triplanar nature of things, and this might change everything. Well, not everything, but it might change the settings we're using. So if I set this to triplanar, you'll see you'll lose that, but then I also want to set my texture 2 to triplanar to get a nicer mix. As I said, that's changed the look, so I might actually want to just adjust my settings till I get back to somewhere where it looks, you know, better. Okay, I think that's good. We have a kind of a big dusty bit up the top. We have a, you know, a bit down the bottom where it's dusty, and so on and so forth. We took out the seams, and let's go and have a look at the result. And there we go. We have kind of a dusty kind of set of areas that are really kind of breaking it up. If it's too dusty, you might find that you can adjust your roughness. So if I take this back again, you'll see now it's the shiny bit. So we could take that up, but not quite as far as you know, not quite as far as before. And because this, yeah, I mean, it looks flat on here. It doesn't look like it's bumping or anything. So I don't really want to add any height to it. I was just thinking about, well, perhaps I'll put some height on this. But no, I've looked at the reference. Yeah, not. We could also change our blend mode if we wanted to. So we could have a look to see whether multiply would do it. It's not really doing anything for us. Divide is also not. We could do a lighten, which isn't bad. And yeah, just have a look around it and see. I'm going to fade it out a bit. There we go. Just on the I'm just on the colour here. The other options of you know, roughness and metallic will stay exactly the same. And then I'm going to go to my little render room here by clicking on this camera and take out the background, because I always find it just gets in the way, and have a look. And yes, not perfect, but we're not finished yet, but it's starting to look pretty good. Okay, so in the next one we're going to add kind of the fine layer on top. You see all these little scratchy bits, the little dots. We've got lots of little dots on the edges, which are, you know, much whiter than everything else. We're going to add those in and see where we go. Okay, so talk to you then. Okay, so what we're going to do now is add a kind of pale, really light layer on top of all this to show where things have worn away. And for that, we're going to I'll just create a new layer now, turn off what I'm not going to use just yet, and then we'll have a look, see what we do. So that's added a layer. It's normal. It's a normal blend, but it's not doing much. It's everywhere. So we need to add something. So first of all, I want to highlight some of the edges. So for that, we'll add a black mask, and then we'll add a generator. And because it kind of works in this situation, I use the metal edge. There we go. And you'll see that puts a kind of scratchy all over the place look, which is fine, but I need to refine it a bit. It's a bit much at the moment. So one thing I'm going to do is take the wear level down a bit, and that's going to take it away from spreading too far. And the contrast, if I take that right down, you'll see it kind of goes everywhere, which I'm not unhappy about. I'm going to turn that up a little bit, and let's actually go to the map or the mask, because I can see much better with that. So again, if I go really contrasty, I get very tight, and if I go down to low contrast, I get a nice kind of spreading blend, which is good, because I can always break it up, which we'll do in the next layer. So the grunge amount, if I turn that down, I'm going to get no grunge, but if I increase it, I'm going to get loads of grunge. So just find a kind of midpoint that you're happy with. Now, the grunge scale is controlling kind of these wispy bits and cracks that are going out, and it's too big, so I need to take it down a bit. So the further I go up this list, the more scratchy it's going to get, and the more kind of detail you get into it. But the counter to that is it tiles, and because it tiles, we get this kind of repeating pattern, which we want to get rid of. So we're going to do that in the next layer. So above this layer, I'm just going to add a fill layer, and on this fill layer we'll pick a grunge. So I'm on my textures library, and I've typed in grunge, and I'm going to pick kind of a spotty looking one even. So let's try this one here. So I'm going to drag and drop that into the mask, and that's what we get. So we get splotches all over the place, and of course we have some things where we can adjust. So with the balance and contrast, you can make them really tight, or you can soften them up a bit. There's even a kind of a brush pattern option where we can increase or decrease that. If it's too big for you, you can increase your tiling to get it up to a bigger level. And you'll notice down here we have a kind of a seam going on there. So I can turn this to a triplanar. Or can I? No, I can't turn this one into a triplanar. Yes, I can. So I'll turn it just from UV projection to triplanar, and that kind of gives me a changed look because it's projecting differently. So I might need to either reset my scale, which gives me a really big, or I can increase my scale to get to where I want to, but not so much that I just get another repeating pattern. And you'll see I kind of am getting a repeating pattern, but I can mitigate for that a little bit by simply rotating here, and it will become less obvious. Okay, so I mean it's obvious here, but it's not quite so obvious on the on the actual model itself. So let's go and have a look, see what that looks like. So at the moment it looks like we don't have a metal edge going on. So what we need to do is change our mix mode. So we can either go to add, which will add the two together and really break up the tiling that we were trying to get rid of on the metal edgeware, or we could go perhaps to subtract, which does the same but just takes the wear away, takes that those spots and the metal edgeware away completely. If it's too much, you can always use a blend to, you know, reduce the effect, but I think that looks not too bad at all. Okay, so the last sort of big change I want to make is to add maybe some broader detail, but to add an, you know, on the edge of the blade where it, you know, goes to the actual cutting edge. I want to distinguish that from the flat piece, so we're going to put something along there to do that. Okay, so I'll talk to you then. Okay, so let's just do a quick adjustment to that last layer, just for the settings. So I'm going to really bring up my white and really bring up my roughness. There we go, somewhat along those lines. Okay, so I said that we want to kind of do something on this blade piece to kind of distinguish it a little bit. So what we'll do is add a fill layer. Oh, that wasn't the last layer I was on, it's this one. I'll undo. There we go. Yeah, the colour's probably okay. Roughness a bit, and a bit darker. And then our dusty metal. This one, yeah, I'd already changed that up to white and increase that. There we go. Perhaps not. There we go. So let's add a fill layer and a black mask, and then we're going to use our flood fill tool on this polygon fill, and just on the 2D view, because I find I have a little bit more control over selection here in terms of selecting through meshes. I'm just dragging over a polygon just to add it to the mask. There we go. I just want to go around the blade. The tip's going to be the worst because, you know, down the bottom it's just a couple of triangles essentially. So let's switch this to mask so I can see exactly what I'm doing. There we go, I've got that one. Whoops. It's because I've been in other applications. My fingers still think I'm in Blender. There we go. Think one in there. Got that one. Got that one. Lovely. So now that we've got that, we can change the way the edge looks. So I've got colour on, and what I think I want to do is darken up what's below on that slope. So let's go back to the main layer and grab the thing and darken it, and that kind of excludes just about everything underneath it, which is annoying because I don't want it to. So let's change this to a multiply or even a subtract. Yeah, it's not really happening on the base color layer. Let's go to the base color layer and then I can really see it without all the other effects. Let's turn the other effects off that I'm not going to use. Let's try add. No. Normal, definitely not. Multiply, no. Guy's really not wanting to do anything, is it? It might be because my colour is either too light or too dark. So let's try multiply there. It's because I'm an idiot. Look, I'm on the roughness layer. Gonna start. No, I'm not. Okay. Let's put that back to base colour and see if I can get my brain in order. And steer to multiply. There we go. Now we're getting a difference. And if I adjust this colour, you'll see, you know, if I go darker, you know, it really goes darker, and if I go lighter, it has less of an effect. So I kind of want somewhere in the middle, or in this case about a quarter of the way. So for the other effects, I might actually turn them off. So currently we've got roughness and metal, so if I turn them off, you know, we go straight to having, you know, it's got all the same properties underneath in terms of what the metal setup and thing. We've just changed the colour essentially. Okay, so I've now decided that that should be below that layer. No, it shouldn't. It should be above it. There we go. Just checking. You know, I do that on every once in a while. Okay, so what else do I want? I really want a final kind of really kind of intense white dots all around. So yeah, let's have a look at that in the next one. Okay, so let's add some white spots to this. So I'm going to add another fill layer. Whoops, not with right click, I'll just add it from here. And then we'll add a black mask, and then I'll add a fill layer under that. And I've just filtered my texture library for noise, and I'm going to pick out this crunch spots here, or Gaussian spots rather. I'm going to drag and drop that into my grayscale, and you'll see that it starts to put a splotchy kind of texture all over the place. Let's then go to mask, and these spots are way too big, so I'm going to go to noise, parameters, and increase my scale. And now I've got lots of dense little spots of varying kind of intensity. So to thin the herd, I'm going to increase my contrast, and you could also mess around with the balance to take out more if you really wanted to. There we go. If it's too much, you know, you can always take the scale down a bit, but as you take the scale down, the spots are going to get bigger and bigger. I'm putting it to max because I want them to be small, and in fact I want them to be even smaller, so I'm going to change my UV scale and set that to 2 so it tiles twice. I don't think anybody's going to see it, so you know, we'll see the tiling in it at least. So I think we're safe. Okay, so with that said, let's go back to our material layer and our material view, and now we've got these little spots all over the place. I'm going to make them quite white, and I'll perhaps take the height down just a touch. If I take it right down, it gives quite a nice effect, but I think it's a bit too rough. So let's go for somewhere not quite as harsh as that, and because they're pitted, I'm going to take the roughness right up. We'll turn everything else off because I'm not using it. So if you're content with that, then that's as much as you need to do there. If you're not, like me, and you want to put some kind of at least bits where there's more spots than others, I'm going to add another fill layer to this, and let's go at fill, and this time I want a broader kind of look, something maybe cloudy. So let's try cloud and see what we've got. So we've got clouds 1, 2, 3, we've got a dirty cloud, and if I filter for textures this time, just cloud 1, 2 or 3. So I'm going to go 2 and drag that into my colour. Let's go and have a look at our mask and see what that looks like. So it's quite broad at the moment, so we need to mess with that a bit. I'm going to take my balance down, and then I'm going to start to get, you know, regions. I've got a bit of a seam going on there, so before I go much further I'm going to turn it to triplanar, and then we'll adjust our balance and contrast and scale until we get the kind of effect we want. There we go. So contrast I'm keeping quite high this time, or quite low rather, but balance I'm going to bring down a little bit, because I don't want it to be right there are all the spots are here and there are no spots there. I want there to be kind of a gradation between the two, and this should help give us that. So let's mess with disorder, see what that does. Kind of boils, it's alright. Scale is perhaps a bit, yeah, it's alright. The triplanar is giving us this repeating kind of effect, but I don't see much way around it, to be honest. So let's think about it, let's do what we need to do. So back to material, and at the moment it's overwhelming the spots, so we need to blend these. So whoops, that's not the one I wanted. So let's try subtract and then turn that off and on, and you can see that some of those spots are dimming out and others are staying where they are, which is what I wanted, but it's not necessarily as strong as I wanted. So now I might change the contrast up, and you'll see that starts eating away at the blend, and if I take the balance right down, that really messes it up. Okay, so we've got hardly any up here. It's fairly dotted around, it's not looking too bad. So let's go and have a look at our material itself and see what we think. I'm actually going to go and have a look in the render room now. Okay, so for the blade I'm actually pretty happy. It might not be, you know, necessarily what you expected, but I'm pretty happy with it. For everything else I'm not, so we're going to work on that, and we'll perhaps start with the handle and the pommel, and then we'll go from there. So I will talk to you then. Okay, so the Hilt part of this is going to be dead easy because it's already in its own folder. So just open that folder, and I'm going to add a layer above this. So let's add a fill layer, and you'll see that that immediately goes over. Now one thing that it is doing is picking up height information from underneath. What we can do for that is go to the height channel and just change that to normal. Well, that didn't work. That's because it's not the one I should be doing it on. I do apologise, so let's put that back to L dodge. What I should do is put it on the folder and set that one to normal, and then that will eliminate anything that's not in the folder. Foolish man. Okay, so on our layers down here now, then we can control what's going on. So for this I need to kind of invert my masks. So I'm going to turn colour on for here, and I'm going to sort of make it a pale grey, but it's being overmasked by what's above it. So if I copy this layer here, or this mask, and paste it into here, Where's the paste? It's down there. And then right click on it and invert mask. There we go. Now I've got that, you know, I've got that little wrap going on, which is good. I'm pleased with that. And then for this other layer, for the main layer, I'm just going to go to materials and take my filter off. And what I want is some kind of, what have we got here, silicon coat. Yeah, I think that might work. I'm not entirely sure whether this is one I've downloaded or an original, but that gives me quite a nice look there. On this layer below, I'm going to adjust this because I want it to be brighter, and I'm going to take the roughness and turn it right down so it's quite metallic under there. At this point I've realised that perhaps my filter is not quite working. My line mask, it might be a bit big, but yeah, so such is life. But what I do want to do is just build a bit of sort of texture information on this. So on this layer, sorry, on this filter, on this mask rather, I want to add an anchor point. So I'll call this binding. Oops, not mask, just binding. And we can refer to that above then. So above this layer I'm going to add another layer. I'm going to add a black mask. Add a black mask, there we go. Add a generator, and this time I'm going to use something else. Let's try, let's go for dirt. There we go. And on this dirt I'm going to go down to the micro height and go to anchor points and select binding, and then just a little bit above that I have the micro details. I can enable micro height, and you'll see that immediately puts some in on those binding edges, and we can adjust our values here to, you know, get some interesting effects and spread and so on and so forth. There we go. So all that's really left to do on that is to change this material. So I don't want the height, I don't want metal, emission, opacity or normal. This I want to be darker perhaps. Perhaps I want that to be lighter, and I want the underneath to be darker. I think that's true. So let's take this main colour and bring it down a bit. That's more like it. And then I want to increase any roughness on that so that it's rougher than the kind of silicon underneath it. Okay, so that's got the hilt done. I think my metal's a bit shiny, and that's down here. So I'm just going to take that roughness up, and I'm going to darken it to make it a little bit more interesting and a little bit more in fitting with the rest of the sword. Okay, so next we're going to do something I haven't done in one of these videos yet. Is that I'm actually going to paint in Substance Painter. Who would have thought it? So up to now I've just used generators and textures and things that I can control, and part of the reason for that is at this point in time I could save these as a smart material, and it would work on other models, that is. But as soon as I start painting it becomes a little bit yeah, a little bit more tenuous, because when I paint on a UV it's in that specific place on that specific model. When I bring in the next model, it might not be the same. Well, it's almost certainly not going to be the same, so it's going to have some slightly odd results. It's not unheard of for me to add paint layers into into a smart material, but I generally leave them blank, and I leave them there so that if I want to, I can go in and paint in there without having to set up new layers. Anyway, so we'll do that in the next video, and I'll talk to you then. Okay, so what I want to do is take out some of the effect on this to make it less kind of smushed and you know, just a mess. If I adjust any of these functions, I'm just going to adjust it on the blade, and I quite like the blade, so I'd rather not do that. So what we're going to do is use some paint to take out some mask. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off my layers until I get down to the one that I want to change first, and it's that one there, my fill layer 2. That's why it's kind of important to, you know, label them, because sometimes I lose track. So I'm going to right click on the mask and add in a paint layer, and then I'll go to the mask view, and we can see what the mask looks like, and yeah, we can paint this out. So let's do that. So if I paint white, I'm going to add to the mask. So what I want actually to do is paint black, and as I paint black into this, it's going to take away that mask. So let's go up to material, and we can see that I've got a very obvious painted bit there. So I'm going to undo, and then whoops, I've got undone too many times, but we're going to change our brush out to help us with that. So I'm going to filter for dirt, and I think perhaps this dirt 3, and then let's go to our mask view and have a look, see what we can do. So I'm on the wrong type of layer, so let's go to paint layer. I've got the dirt, I'm in black, so yeah, I haven't got the brush though, so let's double click that brush, there we go. So I'm going to scale that down a bit and just use this to dot around to quite subtly blend out some of that really harsh mask. At this point in time, it might well suit me or benefit me to turn on symmetry. So let's do that. That's not symmetry, that is. So you see I've got the red line down the middle, and now if I go in on this side and start to paint, should do it on the other side, and it's just going to mean that I don't have to do, you know, both at the same time. So I'm just trying to make it a bit more subtle, you know, not quite so harsh or thick. You know, up here is way too thick. So I just want to kind of blend that out a little bit. Again here, to thin out those lines to accommodate for, you know, the adjustments I can't really make on the other, you know, on the functions. So I could, you know, just make multiple folders with multiple parts in it, but in this case I just want to do it, you know, a bit differently. Somehow feel that the more layers you have, the more kind of masks and things, the more it's going to slow you down a bit, because, you know, there's only so much memory in the world, and you know, especially on one PC, once you've hit that point, you know, things get tough, start slowing down, and, you know, making your life far more difficult than you want it to be. Okay, so anyway, I've given that a paint over. It's not very exciting or even good perhaps, but let's go back to the mask and see, on the material, and see what that's done. So for that it's okay actually, it's kind of broken it up a bit, but we have other layers to do. So if I turn this one on, it kind of gets rid of it. You know, there's even more to take out. So again, I'm going to add, oops, not on that one, on this one, a paint layer. Oops, where are we? We're down here. And let's go to our mask view and see where we've got a lot of white. So I'm just going to take it out a little bit. Try not to have too many big areas of white on the on this handle piece. You know, if you go in too hard, you know, you might find that you want to go in and just correct for that a bit, you know, by changing the layer opacity, something along those lines. Oops. And actually, while I'm here, I'm going to come down and do this pommel piece as well. So that's got way too much white on that face. So I'm just going to break it up a bit to, you know, give it a chance. So at the moment it's, you know, there's no definition at all. It's just taking out all of the metal underneath it, pretty much. Especially this side, look. So I'm not continuously clicking. You might be able to hear my mouse. I'm doing sort of click, 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 click. That just helps me, I think, break it up a little bit more, rather than sort of having lines like that in it, you know. If you wanted to, you could be adjusting your opacity as you're doing this to, you know, add a bit of variation to the noise you're putting in. Let's go and have a look at the material now. That's starting to look a bit better. And then we have a layer above that one even. Let's turn that one on. That's the blade layer. Okay, that's okay. Okay, so let's turn symmetry off and have a look at our rendered model. And there we go, we have a sword. Let's rotate the light around with shift and right mouse button. And yeah, it's looking alright. I think what I want to do is perhaps just stamp some sort of sigil into that pommel. I might even change the material completely in the middle of that pommel, but you know, I'm just going to have a think about that between videos. In the meantime, I'm going to have a small break and find a coffee. It's been probably a few hours now, so I will talk to you when I get back. Okay, so I've decided to enhance this kind of middle piece. So I'm going to add a folder at the top, and then I'll right click and add a black mask, and with the fill tool there I'm going to just select in to pick up all of these vertices that make up that inner circle. So let's go to the mask so I can clearly see that I'm actually selecting something, and just select over those. So once I've selected something, it kind of stays selected. So if you over select, just undo. Yeah, the other option is to simply turn your selector to black, and that will undo it as well, or that will deselect whatever you go over. Okay, so I've got those highlighted, and now anything that I put under this folder is going to go on those polygons. So let's go to our not roughness, material view, and switch over to the paintbrush. Now we can pop something in there. So it's a toss up what you want to do really, and how deep you want to go into it. I want to add in some colour to this, just something to, you know, break up the greyness. So let's go to our actually I'm going to use smart materials here, And I'm just going to grab this bronze armour and drag and drop it into that folder, and that should apply. And have a think about it. There we go. So now I've got kind of a bronzy effect in there. So again, I've still got my kind of pitting from my height map, and I can get around that by going to height on the folder and changing it to normal, and that should take that away. That pitting there is from the bronze armor rather than the underlying ones. So the last thing, as you might have guessed, because I've got an alpha loaded, is I want to stamp a design into this. So for that, I'm just going to add a new paint layer over the top of this, and for this paint layer I only want height and rough, and I'm going to set those values. So I've set quite a low height value and a high rough value. And actually, one thing to look at is the alignment. So your alignment is generally tangent warp, or wrap rather. It's easier or better to go UV for this particular one. So if I click in there, I'm going to get a little stamp. If I make my brush a little bigger, it might actually fit a little better. There we go. And I should be able to do it on the UV as well. There we go. And now we can use that information to, add some, detail to bring those two things really together. So above that, I'm going to add another fill layer. To that fill layer, I'll add a black mask, and in that black mask we'll add a generator. And for the generator, we'll pick our UV mask editor. So for this, I need to put an anchor point on our paint. So this paint layer, I'd need to right click and add an anchor point, and on the mask editor I can pick either of these as my micro, as my source. So in the anchor points, I'm going to select my layer 1, and then go up a little bit, open up micro details, and label micro height. There we go. That should do the job. So let's have a look at the mask that's creating currently. If anything, it's not really creating much at the moment, and that's because I've forgotten what to do, what I always forget to do, which is change the channel it's looking in. So down the bottom you'll see reference channel. If I switch that to height, it should work. Yep, see, it comes in straight away then. Then I can adjust my details here. I can make it a bit higher, can add a bit of radius to it and maybe some depth. It's not responding very much, possibly because it's not much of a of a difference. So let's try some different types. Let's go standard, seveal, which is default, and then smooth, which gives me nothing at all. So let's go seveal. So that gives me something then to put some detail into. And if I go onto this layer now and head back to material, you'll see there's kind of a whitish edge around it because I've got a base color on it. I could adjust the height again. So if I adjusted the height again, I would get kind of a double design, because it's bringing the height out twice. It's not only the height that it originally put, it's the height around it as well. I wouldn't necessarily advise that, but it's it's a possibility. So I'm going to turn height off. Let's turn all those off. Let's try to make it a bit more interesting. I think perhaps I need a colour, so I'm going to dip into here and get a darker version of that. Let me step back. and this is one of those cases where I'm not entirely sure whether it's working or not. So yeah, it's working. So that is giving me, you know, an effect, and it's, yeah, not bad. So this original one, I think I might have gone a bit nuts on my roughness. So rather than, well, I can't because it's a painted layer, I can't just change it, but I can go to the roughness channel and turn down the blend just until, you know, it's as I want it, or as, you know, as required. Okay, so let me zoom out. See, that's going to be kind of a small detail on our sword, you know, as it's viewed. It looks a bit much actually, so I might change the height mix as well. Let's have a look and take that down a little bit. See, it goes right down. Then if I go right down, it disappears completely. But I think it was over the top, you know, where it was. Okay, so let's have a look at it in the render view. There we go. Doesn't look too bad at all. You know, it's a background asset. You know, it's not gonna, you know, you're not going to get any close-ups of it. It's not a hero asset. You know, it's something that's going to be in the scene, that's going to enhance the scene. It's pretty low poly. There's not an awful lot to it, but it looks really smooth and lovely, and the texture is convincing, or at least convincing enough to be seen at distance. You know, if I was going to do like a hero prop, and I might do I might do a tutorial set on a hero prop, but this really is something that you might give to a, you know, or you might add to a scene, whether it be a game, movie, or whatever, that's just somewhere in the background. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that. I'm just going to have a look in my render settings here and see if I can enhance this anywhere by changing out the HDR. I quite often like this Gdansk shipyard. It seems to make everything look good. I don't know why, it just does. Yeah, so we could try it under a few different lighting conditions. Let's try like a studio lighting. Oh, that's quite nice. Yeah, it comes out quite good. Yeah, just have a look around, see what you like, and you know, find the sort of settings that appeal to you. And of course, use shift and right mouse to move the light around, just to get, you know, just that right angle. Okay, so that's that. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will talk to you in another set.